Welcome back, guys. The War of Zechariah 12. So, why do I call what we're about to experience in the Middle East the War of Zechariah 12? And the fact is that I call this a world war. The fact is that it is not a world war in terms of the fighting, because the main fighting is going to be in the Middle East between Israel and its neighbors. But the fact is also that the significance and the effects of this war are going to be worldwide. The other thing I want to note is that there are many places in the Bible that talk about this war, and many details of this war are given by different prophets. However, it is in Zechariah 12 where I can most distinctly see the differences that are outlined between this war and the war of Armageddon, and also between this war and the war of Gog and Magog that is described in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Anybody that has tried to make sense of prophecy listening to different prophecy teachers will be aware that these three wars, the war of Zechariah 12, the war of Ezekiel 38 and 39, and the war of Armageddon, are all kind of lumped up into a mixture, like as if it was one war campaign, and that it is all happening towards the end of the period of the Great Tribulation. I hope to shed some light into this subject because Zechariah 12, Ezekiel 38 and 39, and Armageddon are all separate from each other. There are many years separating one from the other. These wars are fought between Israel and very different enemies every time. Each one of these wars has its own special significance in the prophetic program of God, and we're going to dig into their significance as we go on with this study. So let's look at Zechariah 12 and see some of the details of the war.
Zechariah 12:2. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. In that day will I make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in sheaves. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left, and Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. Now there are two main points to take out of this passage. One is, who is the enemy of Israel? In this war, the enemy of Israel are the people that are round about them. As you will remember, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, it is not the nations that are round about Israel that go to war. It is Gog and Magog. It is Togarma. It is Ethiopia. It is Persia. All these nations have no borders with Israel. None of them can be described as round about. So these two are very different wars. Of course, in the Armageddon war, it is the Antichrist that is coming against Israel, and the nation is decimated until Jesus himself comes back. In Zechariah 12, we see that it is the governors of Judah that are given the strength and the task of disposing of the enemy. So, the people of Israel themselves are winning the war. You will remember that in Ezekiel 38 and 39, God intervenes through supernatural means and destroys the invading army. In Zechariah 12, it is the people and the governors of Judah that destroy the enemy. Then Zechariah 12 makes these two clear distinctions that distinguish this war from the other two. Who the enemies are and who is winning the war. You will remember that in Armageddon, the city of Jerusalem is decimated. Here you don't have any of that happening. The people of Israel win the war, and they make Jerusalem their permanent home, their permanent capital.
Before I go on with a more detailed description of this war, let me please make some personal observations that I think are very important for the Christian believer to understand today, especially in America. We all know that God always takes the worst that the devil can do and he turns it for the good for his kingdom, and for those who remain faithful to him. What we see today in America is a real work of the devil. America is experiencing a virtual collapse of ethics, morality. We all can sense that this nation is teetering at the edge of financial and social calamity. The warnings are coming from everywhere. Financial analysts are expecting the collapse of the dollar and the end of American supremacy in world politics. Political and military observers are warning of dire consequences as a result of the irresponsibility with which the nation's affairs are conducted in Washington. Then, from the religious circles, there are many voices that are sounding some very compelling alarms regarding the fortunes of the nation. If you have not yet paid any attention to, I urge you to listen to the messages of Rabbi Jonathan Kahn about the 9 harbingers of Isaiah 9:10 and their connection with America. Another message you should really listen to is the one about the 4 blood moons, which was first presented by Pastor Mark Biltz, and then it was further elaborated by John Hagee and others. Another prophetic voice that you should be listening to is Reverend John Paul Jackson and his message on the perfect storm. All of these messengers are presenting some very compelling evidence, and they're all converging about some very catastrophic calamities that are coming to this nation. This is going to remove America from being a relevant force in world affairs, at least for a while. So you may say, okay, what's your point? How can God use the collapse of America for anything good for his kingdom and for his people? And my answer to that question is that it should be very obvious. Think about it. There have been some earth-shaking events in regard to Israel, starting out with its miraculous reconstitution in 1948. When you look at the history of the modern state of Israel, as a believer, you can see God working miracle after miracle after miracle in the survival and in the life of that nation. However, when you consider the opinion of a secular person or an Islamic person or a person of any other faith, who do they give credit to for the formation, for the survival, and for the flourishing of the nation of Israel in our day? It is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob they give credit to. It is the United States. There is in this world this grand conspiracy mentality that sees Zionism taking hold and control in America, and then Zionism using America's enormous military and economic power to support and to carry the nation of Israel against all fairness to the Palestinian people of the region, who demand that history be corrected and Israel be driven into the sea and destroyed. I am sure that any objective observer will agree with me that God does not get any credit for the events in the Middle East for the last 60 years. The United States is. This state of affairs cannot continue. The Bible is very clear, and I will bring to your attention when we get to it. The people of the world will all know who saves Israel in the upcoming wars. America must be removed from its place of prominence. Muslims will not be able to blame America for their defeats. All the people of the world will have to acknowledge that God is the keeper of Israel, not the United States. Okay, this much about America. Now, what about the individual believer? Should we button down the hatches and hope that we can survive the storms that are coming and until they blow over? My considered opinion is no. It does not have to be that way. We have the chance to be part of something that is monumentally earth-shaking, something great. God's program calls for a revival that has never been seen in the world yet, not even in the days of the book of Acts. However, if you do not stay close to God and you do not study the Bible, you're going to lose heart and you're going to be destroyed. The upcoming war in Israel is going to be judgment on the Islamic nations that come against Israel, but God's purpose in judgment is not destruction. Destruction will take place, but God's purpose in judgment always is redemption. At this point, I would like to interject some parts of my own journey through the study of prophecy. You will see how that will become relevant to my discussion. I was not even a teenager, maybe I was as young as 8 or 9, when I first became fascinated with the study of Bible prophecy. One of the first things that I remember understanding well in those early days was Matthew 24:14.
And the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come.
Those were the early 60s. I distinctly remember how amused I was when some of my relatives that were going to this church that was teaching that the rapture was about to happen, those people were convinced that at such a date Jesus was coming back, so they gathered in houses for all day and all night prayer meetings so that they could be ready to meet the Lord. At that young age, I knew that they were off their rocker. Okay, Matthew 24:14 made it clear. All people must hear the gospel. As I looked at the political landscape of the world in the early 60s, it seemed to me that it could be eons before that scripture was fulfilled in order to allow for the return of the Lord to end the age of the church. Back then, there were three curtains that the gospel could not go through. First was the Iron Curtain of communism. Second was the Islamic curtain of the 1040 window. And third was the bamboo curtain of China. A good two-thirds of the world had no access to the gospel. There was no way Jesus was coming back in 1964. At that early age, I knew that all three of these curtains must come down so that the gospel can be preached and all people of the world have the opportunity to freely accept or reject Christ. Then Matthew 24:14 would be fulfilled and Jesus could come back and end the dispensation of grace. It is impossible to communicate to a young person today how impossible it seemed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that the Iron Curtain of communism would actually come down. Those were the days that we lived with the Red Menace, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the nuclear war drills in public schools. We know well that even though we prayed for it, that we do not really think that the communist curtain would come down in our lifetime. Most prophecy teachers back then included a communist regime in Russia as the de facto reality included in the times of the Great Tribulation. Yet the Iron Curtain had to come down for Matthew 24:14 to be real, for the people behind the Iron Curtain to hear the gospel. I knew it, I expected it, and I considered myself highly blessed and privileged to be an American and to have voted for the president that God used to bring down the Iron Curtain so that the gospel could be preached in the Soviet Union. However, no matter how difficult it seemed at that time, the fact is that bringing down the Iron Curtain is child's play compared with bringing down the Islamic curtain. Atheism and the restrictions of the gospel in the Soviet republics was a rule imposed by the elite of communism. The people were quite ready to hear the gospel. All God had to do was to judge Russia financially, and the walls came down. Not a single shot was fired, and the Iron Curtain came down. God used America to bring communism to its knees, and the gospel was readily accepted in Russia and its satellite nations. It is an irony of history that the Bible is used as a textbook in Russian schools today, but in American school it has been banned long ago. Does anybody think that God judged atheist communism, but he's going to go easy on America? Anyway, back to our subject. What about the Islamic curtain? How hard is it going to be to bring down that curtain? If you think about it, the task is daunting. In communism, the authorities were keeping down the lid on the gospel. In Islam, everybody, every single person in that society is duty bound by their religion to extinguish any move towards the gospel. If you are a father in Saudi Arabia today and your son is baptized a Christian, you're duty bound to kill him. because he brought disgrace to Islam and to the family. How can such a social reality be reversed to the point that Matthew 24:13 be realized? What must happen in the world for a person living in a Muslim country to be free to choose to accept or to reject Christ? Has it ever occurred to you that God is planning to bring down the Islamic curtain so low that the gospel can be freely preached at the heart of Islam? Not just in Saudi Arabia, but in Mecca itself. Well, it's going to happen. But be sure to brace yourself. It's going to be a rough ride. First, America must come down, as I discussed before. Then God will judge Islam, starting with the nations surrounding Israel. There will be monumental, unimaginable destruction of Islam as it comes against Israel. I want you to close your eyes and try to imagine this thing. When the Twin Towers came down, Islamic radicalism rose to a fever pitch. If President Bush had not gone to war but tried to negotiate, the radicals were fully ready to cause all the mayhem their religion demands so that they can bring back their Mahdi. Even with Americans strong and fighting, the Islamic fundamentalists have gone crazy. Every day we read about their destructive ways of their religion. One thing you must remember, the central focus of their religion involves the fact that Israel is an abomination to their God. The Quran says that Jews are monkeys and pigs. They're duty-bound to destroy every Jew alive. The idea that Israel exists is discordant with every concept of their faith. How do they live with this discordance? How do they sleep at night knowing that the Quran says Jews are pigs, but reality tells them they cannot destroy their God's anathema on the earth? Well, they blame America. They call Israel the little Satan. They call America the great Satan. Their sworn duty is to bring down the great Satan so that they can easily dispose of the little Satan. So, how does all this figure into the bringing down of the Islamic curtain in order for the gospel to be preached freely in the Islamic nations in the Middle East? I would like to call your attention to a historical example in order to illustrate this case. I'm talking about the Japanese experience. If you know even a little bit about the history of World War II, then you'll know that for the Japanese, world domination was described to them by their god. Who was their god? The Emperor Hirohito. It is really no exaggeration. The Japanese worship their dead ancestors. The earthly representative of the dead, the god they obeyed and gave full devotion to, was their emperor. It is a fascinating study to see the lengths they went to in order to win the war, because to them, defeat was not an option. Defeat meant that their god they worshipped was no god at all. That is something unimaginable to accept in any religion. So what happened to the Japanese people when they heard the voice of their emperor on the radio calling for them to surrender to the American forces? Self-alienation. That's what happened. Their God lay dead in front of their eyes. His imperative of world domination was dead. Their God was dead. General MacArthur experienced that mood of the Japanese people after the surrender, and he made an urgent call that at least 10,000 evangelists be sent to Japan from America, and he projected that this would be enough to turn the entire nation to Christianity. Because in the mind of the Japanese people, the God of the Americans was stronger. The call for the evangelists, of course, was ignored. The American people were happy to reap the benefits of peace and world domination after the triumph. The opportunity was lost. It did not take long for America to pay the heavy price for their indifference to the call of the gospel. Japan turned to another God, the God of materialism and economic success. They went at it spirit, soul, and body. Before long, American world prominence of entire industries came to a screeching halt as the Japanese caught up and surpassed the Americans. The failure of America in the aftermath of World War II built the financial prerequisites that have led to what is an imminent collapse of the American economy today. But enough about Japan. How does the Japanese experience compare with what the Islamic world is about to experience? Japan's God ordered world domination. Japanese joined the Axis as a stepping stone to destroy America and the West and later deal with the German megalomaniacs. The Japanese never got past the first step. They were defeated at the first stage of their plan. They experienced a letdown of their God at the hands of America. By comparison, Islam's God is ordering the annihilation of the Jews as a prime directive of their religion. This requires a two-step process also. First, destroy the big Satan, Christian America, and step two, go at the easy task of driving the Jews into the sea. The Japanese never went past step one. The Muslims will succeed in the first step of theirs. I don't know how it will happen, but given all the information we have from all the diverse sources, I fully expect that before the end of 2015, America will be irrelevant in world affairs. I don't know how it will happen. I don't know if there is another terrorist attack that will be involved. But the fact is that Islamic terrorists have already caused enough damage to America and its finances to take full advantage and full credit for the imminent collapse of America when it happens. They will actually taste permanent victory. They will think that they're hearing the footsteps of the Mahdi. With America down and unable to take care of themselves, they will be irrelevant in the world. They will recall and get back as best as they can all military assets from around the world. By the way, I fear that many American military personnel will be stranded abroad, but be that as it may, the Islamic nations surrounding Israel will march in elated vigor and strength to finish off the little chore of wiping tiny Israel permanently off the face of the earth. This scenario may seem far-fetched today. The leaders of Saudi Arabia are not very interested to upset the apple cart and go to war against Israel. Their great oil wealth is more important to them than their religion. The same is true for all the monarchs that are leading the nations around Israel. Even within Palestine, there are conflicting attitudes about war with Israel. The reason? Money. Petrodollars, abundantly, unendingly being pumped into the OPEC nations by their best customer, America, along with American billions coming in as foreign aid. Today, the presence of America as an economic colossus that controls so much wealth and commerce in the Middle East stands in direct opposition to the practice of Islam. No Saudi prince is interested in bringing down the great Satan, America. The US is the only reason they are all swimming in gold. Without America, Russians would have devoured them long ago. America is their best customer for their oil. American environmentalists are their big ace in the hole when it comes to maintaining the integrity of the OPEC cartel and the high price of oil. The existence of America as the superpower that it is in the world today is the only thing that separates the Islamic fundamentalists from what presently is their single-minded goal and their reason of existence, the destruction of Israel. So, with all this in mind, please try to imagine what happens when you remove America out of the equation. What happens when the American economy and the whole nation collapses? Well, there is no more reason for the Islamic moderates to stand in the way of the fundamentalists. Quite the opposite. The fundamentalists have achieved a great and impossible goal. They have brought down America. It will be very difficult, or rather impossible, for the moderates to stay moderate. In the collapse of America, the whole Islamic world will see the vindication of the Quran, the vindication of the fundamentalists, and the triumph of the idea of the world caliphate. They will virtually hear the footsteps of the Mahdi as they proceed to make hamburger of these parasites, the Jews. As I said before, Japan suffered a devastating national self-alienation in losing World War II, and they failed long before they came close to their goal of world domination. The Muslim neighbors of Israel will experience 10 times more intense of devastation when they have their reason for being so close they can taste it. And instead of biting and savoring the triumph, they will bite and their teeth will be broken. This is the moment that will begin the destruction of the Islamic curtain. The description of Zechariah and other prophets make me think that there may be nuclear weapons involved in the fight, but there may not be. We're going to look at more descriptions of this war in other prophets in the next video, but for now I want to leave you with this. The Muslims have to experience an unimaginable devastation at the hands of their worst enemy in order to wake up to the fact that maybe, just maybe, all they heard about Muhammad and Allah was a deception. It will take that kind of a blow to their faith for the Islamic curtain to begin to come down, for the gospel to go forth unhindered and to be preached freely in the 1040 window. Please make no mistake, God loves the Muslim people. The Lord loves all people, and He will do all that is necessary in order to give the gospel to the children of Esau, to the children of Ishmael, to the children of Moab, to every single person on the earth before He comes back in judgment. Americans in the West are not better than the rest of the world. Why should America be able to hear the gospel and freely accept or reject during the relative peace of the church age? Why should the people of the 1040 window have to make that choice under the horrible conditions of the Great Tribulation? Now, when Matthew 24:14 says that the gospel must be preached before the end it is talking about is the end of the church age. This end is marked by the rapture of the church, not by the war of Armageddon. So, if you are a Christian looking at the coming trouble and figuring you're about to be raptured out of the world because it looks like there's too much trouble, forget it. Take off your coat, relax. You're going to be staying around for a while. In the upcoming video, you will see that the role of the church in the upcoming war is clearly prophesied and defined by the prophets. We're not about to get out, people. We're about to get busy, and it is going to be glorious. However, if you do not study, if you do not pray, if you try to live on the natural plane, you will have trouble. Please join me in the next video in which we will begin the explanation of the harmony between Psalm 83 and the book of Obadiah. It is a fascinating connection, and both passages are directly tied into the war of Zechariah 12. Thanks for listening. Now go on to the next video.